So hi there, my name is Emma and I'm from the Yinova Center. Before we dive into our discussion on Chinese medicine and pediatrics, for those of you who are new to Mary Hamawy or Yinova, I wanted to let you know a little bit about our center as well as tell you a bit more about our speaker. So Yinova is an integrative wellness center acclaimed for its expertise in reproductive health. With 3 clinics in New York City and virtual services for people around the world, we work in partnership with our patients and their families to realize their full potential. We offer acupuncture, Chinese medicine, bodywork, and virtual consultations from the field's leading practitioners. Mary is a licensed acupuncturist, board-certified herbalist, and the clinic director here at Unova Brooklyn Heights. She is skilled in all primary modalities of the field. She has served as a complementary medicine extern at NYU Lutheran Hospital's Department of Labor and Delivery, where she gained additional insight on how Chinese medicine can support expectant and new mothers. Mary has a deep passion for pediatric care, and her main goal is to offer a safe space for all of her patients to listen to their bodies and find their own best paths to wellness. Many of you sent in questions prior to this event, which we're looking forward to diving into. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to submit them and I can read them out loud for you. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to Mary to get started.
Thanks, Emma. And thank you for joining us, everyone. As Emma mentioned, we are an integrated care clinic with locations in Manhattan and Brooklyn, and we have a thriving virtual practice as well. So if you're out of the general area, we can see you that way. And we love treating everyone from infants to nonagenarians and then everybody in between. Today, we're going to walk through some tools and systems that Chinese medicine uses to help children and adults too develop well-rounded and balanced habits in order to grow and thrive. So summer is a great time to talk about this, right? Because we're seeing our kids again after they've been back in school for a little while. And we can help them recover from sort of the turmoil of the last year, the turmoil of being distanced and not being distanced in their learning, and get them prepped again for the fall. I want to have a quick disclaimer that seek the advice of your family pediatrician or your Chinese practitioner if you have any concerns about the health of your child or their behavior. These are tools to help at home, but you're not alone and you don't need to go it alone. And so please check in with us if you need extra help. So that all said, I'm going to share my screen. We've got some visuals today. Hopefully they'll behave. So everybody can see the first slide.
I can see it.
Excellent. All right. So we want to say that Chinese medicine has an innate fundamental belief in the body's ability to heal itself and to find balance for itself. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and setting up those tools that your child and you can learn to maintain balance as best as possible throughout life. Kids are fun to treat because they have less baggage than adults and they gravitate toward balance innately. And so just a little nudge here and there and they can get back on track. And so that's one of the many things that makes treating kids fun. So this idea of balance can be tricky to define. How do we know that all systems are operating in tandem the way they should? This symbol is an old chestnut that everybody knows, but it's actually a really profound one, and you can't discuss Chinese medicine without it. It represents the ideas of yin and yang that are central to Chinese medicine, and they are opposing and complementary forces that are part of all life's processes, whether we're talking the size of the great universe or as tiny as a mustard seed. You need yin and yang for things to operate properly. Their constant interaction and shifting between the two of them, you're never fully one or the other. And sometimes through life, we go through phases that we are more or less. And we have to, that cycle of yin feeding into yang and yang feeding into yin is natural and normal, and we have to recognize that. Some of the qualities of them, yin is considered cool, dark, nurturing, restorative. It's like the night. It's restoration and sleep. It's about substance. Yang is more about brightness, warmth. It's like the sun, morning, noontime. It's about warming energies, and it activates the metabolic processes on even a cellular level. Sometimes, though, this imbalance can get a little imbalanced, and we have times that we're more yin or more yang. And it's the interplay between the two that is orchestrated or conducted with chi or life force or innate intelligence. And this is when the body knows how to come back to balance. And it's the chi that drives that mechanism. And there's comfort in this symbol, right? Because it allows a sense of symmetry, a sense of order, a literal idea of what goes around comes around, and that whatever you're going through in life, it will change, and that's a good thing, and that it will be different, and that's a good thing too. And so teaching kids this notion that their bodies are meant to change and grow, and things will be confusing at times, but there's always going to be this balance that they can come back to. It's an important lesson. So we have the idea of more yin, more yang. We can also see this in nature, right? And how the seasons work. And we use in Chinese medicine, the natural world to help decipher patterns within the body. And so if we look at seasonal changes as a guide, we can start with spring. And the ideas of spring with birth, exuberance, outward stretching, like a tree here. Green is the color that's associated with it. Creativity, the motions of sort of driving and striving, all of those are related to springtime. From spring, we lead into summer. And with summer, we think about growth and warmth and heat, like the fire or the sun. It's joyful, it's playful, it's laughter. Summer instead leads to fall. And fall is considered cooler, right? We look at harvesting. It's associated with the element of metal, so blades of a sickle or a thresher in the harvesting way. And another way of understanding harvesting is discernment, right? That you're separating the wheat from the chaff. Here, it's symbolized by a gate, determining what's in and what's out. It provides structure, but it also allows for flow, but gives structure to that flow. From fall, we go into winter, which is more consolidating or storage. It's considered cold with those icy waters here. It is associated with the element of water that can be still and placid, but can, when it's turbulent and overrunning its banks, can overpower all the other elements. Each of these elements are also associated with color. And so for these, oh, actually, we want to do one more click. There's a fifth season in Chinese medicine, and that is late summer, or also any transition between any of the seasons. And with these, it's considered the time of transition. It's warm, but not too hot. It's nurturing. It's associated with the element of earth. Here we have wheat as it's growing. And processing information, digesting. And it takes the lessons we've learned from the previous season and gets us ready to make use of them to enter the next season. So again, sort of the ideas of transition. Again, we've got colors associated: green with spring, red with summer, white or silver with fall, and black or dark blue with winter. And so these colors, they seem simplistic, but they can be really helpful tools in determining a well-balanced meal, right? Eating from the rainbow, you want to make sure that you're eating from all the elements to have balance in your digestion. You have yellow also with the late summer. It can also be helpful in monitoring your child's complexion, if they have a sort of green cast to them, if they're paler, if they have sort of are bright red cheeks. You can understand how things might be slightly imbalanced by just looking at them and their coloring. So we can use this natural cycle to also understand the body and emotions. And instead of seasons, we can think of in terms in Chinese medicine of the major organs in the body. And so for spring, we think liver. For summer, we think heart. For late summer, it's spleen. And notice it's taking the sort of side position here. For fall, we have lung. For winter, we have kidney. And the associations with each of these go deeper and cover almost every aspect of life, can be sorted out through these 5 elements. And these are just a few. So for liver, you can think, we know that the element is wood, the season is spring. Emotion is important here. Is anger with the liver? The sense organ are the eyes. The taste is sour. And the activity is movement. With heart, we know fire in summer. Emotion here is joy. The action is growth. The sense organ is tongue. The taste is bitter, and the activity is play. With spleen, we have the emotion being worry, the action being transformation, as we talked about. The sense organ is the mouth and the lips, and this can get confusing because heart is tongue, and that's more sort of the flavors dancing on the tongue. It's speech. With spleen, it's the feel of the mouth, the feel of the food in the mouth, the lips, and the idea again of digestion starting with the enzymes in the mouth. Its taste is sweet, and activity is eating, but also studying, and we'll dive a little deeper into how those 2 things are related. Okay. And then with lung, we have grief as the emotion. And here we remember that Chinese medicine doesn't necessarily say yin or yang is good or bad, that everything is viewed without judgment. It's the balance of all of the emotions that are important to recognize and to give each its space at the proper time. And this is a great thing to remind kids, to walk through emotions with kids and to really let them know that it's okay to feel the way they feel, and to see if that feeling is too big to handle, how do we balance with other things to make it feel okay, that they can process through it. Its sense organ is nose, its taste is acridity or pungentness, and its activity is breath, as associated with the lung. We also then have the kidneys. Their emotion is fear, their sense organ is ear, their taste is salty, and their activity is sleep. And so from here, we can do a sort of thought experiment of thinking about the best category to where your child might be described. Spring and liver kids are natural leaders. They're creative, they're stretchy and always on the move. Summer kids are fiery, social, dramatic. They're the life of the party or center stage. Late summer or spleeny types are rounder, nurturing, people pleasers, ruminators. They really kind of think over things and sometimes worry a lot. Fall or metal types like rules and structure, especially interested in fairness. So especially in the family dynamic of why did he get that size cookie? I only got this size cookie. They're interested in mechanics, how things actually operate. And the idea, Newton's third law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's really the way their brains work, that it should be in or out and of the gate. Winter types or water types are often introspective, a little shyer, deep thinkers. The term old souls often kind of grows up around kids who are water types. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, wait, my kid has all of these. So I don't get it. Where do I put my kid? And that's actually a great thing, because we want that in children and in adults too. We want an equal balance of all these different things. And what Chinese medicine allows you to do in this, particularly this 5-element system, is it gives you sort of a kaleidoscope to understand the patterns that happen in a developing child, and the complexity of adults too, that sometimes you have a little bit of one and then things change and you see another come to the fore, and you can understand not just the type that your kid is, but also the phases that they're going through and how you can balance each phase so it doesn't overwhelm and disrupt the family dynamic in too great a way. So to do this, to sort of understand the kaleidoscope, we need to first understand the relationship between these 5 elements. And first, we can think of the generating cycle. It's easy to think of this from a seasonal aspect, from spring to summer to fall to winter. But from the elements, we can also think about how wood is creative and feeds joy, just like wood feeds a fire, right? Then the ashes of the fire feed the soil so that earth can nourish and grow new things, just as enthusiasm and joy feeds the urge to eat and to nourish our bodies and to learn more and to nourish our brains. If we're enthusiastic about things, then we get to kind of absorb them more. The earth really nourishes all the elements. That's why it was in the center of the previous picture. But it also, you can think of it that it contains rocks, or specifically ore, which can be then forged into metal. And we can think about it that nuggets of learning gives our life a path or a structure, that the little rocks that we have that we learn. With metal, we can think that it breaks down, the rocks break down and enriches water with trace minerals, which then feeds the life of the water and makes it more nourishing. We can also think how structure can allow for deep thoughts to have a little more containment, and so you don't get sort of lost in the world of deep thought. Then as we round the circle, we can understand simply that water nourishes trees to grow again, just as deep thought can inspire new creativity. If any of these elements is weaker in a child, you can then look to the previous generating element and bolster that to feed the one that's lacking, right? So if your child is kind of sad and down and its heart joy is not as strong as you would like, talk about things that are creative, move more, and see if that generates a sense of joy. Similarly, if your kid is tight and grumpy and constrained, which is what the liver does when it's not feeling so great, you can see A, if they need more sleep, or B, if things like meditation or breathing can sort of help that way. It can lead into better wood behavior. But each of these elements can also get to be too much as well. You can have too much of a good thing. And in that case, we have what's called the controlling cycle, that the element on the opposite side of the circle will help control the one that's out of control. So you can think if wood is too out of control, too all over everywhere, you think of kudzu taking over all over everything. Metal, like an axe, can prune it back and let new clean shoots to grow. Similarly, if the spleen is getting too worried or too into eating or too much studying, bringing some movement from the liver side can help. If water is raging out of control, you can think sandbags on the edge of a flood. The earth element's ability to gather what's necessary out of deep thought and put it into action, that transformation of deep thought into action, kids can really understand that with a little more nourishing food and ability to sort of study what they're thinking as opposed to just letting their mind wander a little too much. And then similarly, if fire is raging, water can douse it. So if too much energy and exuberance is kind of your issue, then it needs a little stillness to balance. The yang needs a little yin to root. And so yoga, meditation, and of course sleep is always really important. And then lastly, if metal has become too rigid, too rule bound, fire can help with its impulse to play and fire softens metal is the way you can think of it. And so now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, this is all great, but it's a lot of metaphors and where do I go from here? And so let's simplify a little bit. If we can take one very simple idea of each element or season and its particular action with kids, we can look at it this way, that liver is movement, heart is play, spleen is eat and study, lung is breathing, and the kidneys are sleep. And this goes for parents too, right? Especially all of us are out of balance over this past horrible year. And we can think of it as operating really without the metal or lung element. We've had a lot of the kidney sleepy quiet time, and outside world has been all fire. That, you know, everything's moving all sorts of directions and it's unpredictable. And the lung is what allows for that separation between the two. It allows for those structures and rules and predictability. And so if it's one thing that we all are craving is predictability these days. And so to set up structures in the household of schedules, and it's of course easier said than done because we set schedules and then we ignore them, but to be mindful that to add a little predictability back into life is what kids crave on a fundamental level anyway, but particularly after this year, watching us as grownups being worried about unpredictability. It suits us all to add a little bit of more structure and quiet breathing time. And yeah, and that's another interesting thing these days is the notion of the structured schedule in terms of all the things kids are doing, like they're going to their piano and they're going to their guitar and then they're going to soccer and then they're going to basket weaving. Removing some of that activity and actually scheduling in the quiet, the time for imagination, the time for breathing, the time for yoga at home, or sort of quiet time is really, really important to balance the yin and the yang of kids. And because we are such a yang driven society these days that the kids are really good at all that stuff, but they're not always the best at grounding. And this shows in a new concern with childhood insomnia, which is on the rise, and which acupuncture and Chinese medicine can help with tremendously in restoring this balance of how to transition from the busy to the quiet. So that I'm going to stop share and we can look at some questions.
That was so interesting. And I feel like I've heard, obviously I've heard practitioners talking about the 5 elements and the generating and the controlling, but the way that you explained it just now just really clicked with me at least. And I found that really interesting and helpful. And I don't have a kid myself, but I could see myself in some of the elements that you were explaining. I think I might be a spleen kind of gal. But that was super interesting. And we do have some questions that people submitted beforehand. So we can start with those. And then if anyone has any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or the Q&A and I can read them out for you. So one of the questions we got was about stir crazy kids. So they were looking for advice on handling a pent up 10-year-old. And I was thinking of this question when you mentioned the rise of insomnia. And I wonder if that seemed really interesting to me. I wonder why that is happening. And I wonder if it is like all of the technology, or I don't know what could be causing it, or if there's a correlation, but would love to hear your thoughts on managing a stir crazy pent up kiddo.
Yes. As far as the insomnia thing, we could talk for days about that with kids. And I actually just came off a course on that for the weekend. Lots of people are talking about this in pediatrics, especially. But with the pent up kid, usually that kind of language indicates to me, and again, it's a kaleidoscope and everybody has little elements of different things going on. And that's important for us to consider when we see new pediatric patients is to really dig deep with the parents and the child as to all the elements and how things are getting together. But usually the easiest answer is the liver is feeling constrained is a term that we use a lot in Chinese medicine. And it's not allowed to express itself the way it wants to, either through movement or through creativity. And so there are two ways to think of it is, does it have the nourishment that it needs? So is it getting the sleep that it needs to express itself properly? And does it have an outlet to do that expression? And so things to think about are feeding it with sleep and imagination games. A lot of kids, because they're always just using their thumbs, they are not able to use their imaginations quite as much. And I think I lived in Poland for a time, and I think of looking out my back window, and there was a kid with a mud puddle and a stick. That's all he had. And he was going to town. He was just having the best time with just a mud puddle and a stick. And I thought back then, it was 20 years ago, even back then, we just don't have the time and space in our day to let kids do stuff like that. And so to carve out places where kids can just be by themselves and be their creative person is really important. And then moving and stretching and things like sports are great, again, in moderation, everything in moderation. So many of our kids are, going to practice every day or 3 times a week, and then they spend their weekends traveling to different teams, competitions. It's a lot for a little person to absorb and not have that downtime. So pent up kids can often be overtired kids or kids that are giving so much away that they don't really have anything for themselves, which seems counterintuitive, but it's often that mechanism that's at play.
That's such a cute image too about the kid with the mud puddle and the stick. That's it's pretty awesome.
We all need a little mud in the stick, I think.
Yeah, that's really cute. So someone had sent in a question feeling worried about guiding their kid through re-entering bigger social engagements and wondering if you had advice on balancing overstimulation. And I feel like this is probably advice that would be helpful for all people of all ages.
Exactly. It's a fantastic question. And it really is not just for kids. We're all going through this of that we really want to see our friends, and then we see our friends. It's like, oh my God, I can't do anymore. So and you think about, again, the element associated with socialization and joy and interaction is fire, right? That is the thing that warms us and keeps our hearts alive. The heart loves to talk it out. And so I think that's a really important element of helping with this dynamic of today, to let kids understand that it's okay to hold space for 2 feelings at the same time, that they really want to see their friends and they really want to get out, but that it can be exhausting and really confusing trying to, like, oh, I can see people's faces again and I have to read their face and I have to understand their emotions and the other person's emotion. And it's a lot of stimulation at once. And so talking it through is critical. The other idea is to, again, balance the yin and the yang, that if you're going to have a busy time, then let it ruminate, let it rest a little bit. Don't overschedule, leave time for recovery, really, because that's what you're doing. You're stretching yourself in one direction, so you have to let yourself stretch in the other.
That's really good advice.
Yeah, for us all. If only it were that easy. That's the trick.
I went out for dinner with a friend over the weekend, and by 10 p.m. I was like, bedtime.
That was great. Thanks. Okay.
Fortunately, we were on the same page and feeling.
I think so many people are. I hear it all the time in clinic of like, yeah, I went out and then I couldn't sleep because I was just so excited.
Yeah, it's too much. It's so funny. And I feel like kids might not realize that we relate to them a bit more than they might.
Yeah. And I think always that's important, that, parents are humans too.
Definitely. Um, so someone was wondering, this is a little not off topic, but a slight transition. So someone was wondering, and I know that a lot of people are struggling with allergies right now, and was wondering if there's a natural, gentle solution for kids with runny noses and seasonal allergies.
That it's a really interesting question and something that Chinese medicine works with really, really, really well. And a lot of the kids that we see are kids that are suffering from allergies. And so one way to think of allergies is that the immune system is sort of running amok, right? It's over exaggerating what it should do. And the immune system is what determines what comes in and is okay and what should not, right? It's the barrier of how our body works. And so, in other words, it's the gate, so metal. And when metal is acting up, or in this case, it's really deficient, and so it's overacting in order to try to get things out. And it goes back to that generating cycle. And so what generates metal is earth. And so we always look to diet and digestion first. And diet and digestion, again, earth really is in the center of everything. Diet and digestion affects all of the elements, but it's particularly important when we have inflamed immune systems. And so focusing on dialing back, if not eliminating inflammatory foods like dairy and gluten and stuff can really help. Well-rounded diets and eating the rainbow. So many kids are sort of stuck on their one thing that they like, the chicken nuggets and the, if you're lucky, you can get a red pepper into them or something. Experiencing the joy of food and the creativity of food and getting them involved in the kitchen, that can improve dietary habits and improve digestion, which will ultimately make them stronger and able to soothe their immune system and have it function the way it should. Acupuncture can really help with this too. For those of you who are you stick needles in children, that's terrible. They are teeny tiny. I don't know if you can see these. And we do not retain them. It's not like a grown-up acupuncture session where you lie there for half an hour. They're super thin. It's thinner than the thinnest wire you can imagine. And we just go in and out real quick, maybe, 3 spots on the body. And most kids are really fine with it, especially infants. Infants love acupuncture. It's a little strange. It's just enough to draw attention to certain places in the body to help them function better. We also use Japanese tools called shonishin, which they're funky little shaped metal objects that the kids can choose which ones they like better. And we can stimulate points and the channels the way and redirect how energy works through the body with those as well. And so that can be really effective with immune issues and allergy symptoms. So that's a long-winded answer, but.
That was great. And I'm glad that you touched on some of the tools that we use as well. I always love seeing the shonishin tools. Those are so.
They're beautiful. Only the Japanese could come up with things like this. They're really fun.
I feel like that'd be really fun too for the kid to get to pick their tool.
It is, yeah. And we try to be very interactive when they come in, and they needle us and we needle them. And, it's fun. And as they grow older, teenagers are not so into that idea, but we explain sort of these ideas of balance and how you can be your best self, and they generally get on board pretty quick. So.
Great. I saw a question come in about ticks and Lyme disease, which I will read out in a moment. But while we're talking about immune systems and immunity and with allergies, I wanted to, someone had asked about the vaccine, the COVID vaccine and children, and wondered what your thoughts are. I know that we've been speaking about how Chinese medicine can help people more generally prepare and recover from the vaccine, but just love your thoughts on, yeah, on the vaccine in kids.
So it in my mind, it triggers one important point about vaccines in general, and even just the sort of traditional vaccination schedules that kids are required in many states to get. And acupuncture and Chinese medicine are really good at soothing reactions to those. And so we can see a child, a couple of days before and a couple of days after. That will really help mitigate any negative reactions that they might have to the shots. So that's just sort of one little shameless plug to add in. For the COVID vaccine for children, it's a bit of a moving target at the moment. We're now ages 12 and up are eligible. There was a thought that maybe we might get the 6 to 12s going this summer. It seems like that's probably been delayed a little bit. There is understandable concern, I think, among parents of older kids, whether they should get the vaccine or not, especially now due to these very few but scary reports about myocarditis and pericarditis in children, mostly males of sort of late teens, early 20s. But NPR had a good workup on the math on that recently, and they said picture a stadium of 100,000 people between the ages of 16 and 39. Which is the subset that is considered to be at the greater risk of this. And you vaccinate them all, and 2 might get myocarditis. Whereas if you don't vaccinate any of them, it's estimated that about 1,300 will get COVID. So, and those numbers are likely to increase as we get back to the winter and such, and back into schools. So the numbers say do it. And we can help again on the beginning and end of it, just to help process the medicine.
Thank you, that's helpful. And then I just wanted to remind people who are here, we'll send a link to this recording so you can watch it later. I know there was a lot of information at the beginning as well, and I can add in a little recap with that link that Mary just mentioned. So someone had asked about tick bites and noticing that there have been more ticks in Brooklyn, which is, I hadn't heard that, and that's a little scary. Does Chinese medicine or East Asian medicine, what kind of role can we play with tick bites or with Lyme disease or, yeah?
So when identified early, especially in children, Western meds work brilliantly. Chinese medicine can help right alongside to expel the toxins that are coming in. If it's a late diagnosis, it can be tricky, but again, it leads the idea of the inflammatory systems just kind of going haywire. And Chinese medicine is excellent at soothing inflammation. And there have been studies all over determining how well Chinese medicine can soothe the immune system and allow the body to move from this sort of state of alarm to calm and soothed. And so acupuncture and herbs can definitely help. The farther along the diagnosis is, of course, the more complicated it becomes, depending on how ingrained it becomes in the body systems and how long it can take to kick it out. Sometimes it's never quite kicked out. It's just more that we're managing symptoms. And so aches and pains can really, really, really be significantly reduced through acupuncture and herbs. So it's a great question, and we can help a lot.
That's great. I actually didn't know that. So that's very interesting. So we had a question about struggling to help their kids. So someone said, I'm struggling to help my kid wind down after school. They're in school more now than home, but creating that divide is still difficult. So do you have advice on how to kind of foster that balance, and especially with homeschool, creating that divide even when your home is home and home is school?
Yeah, all of those divides of work and home and school, and yeah, it's been tricky. But it's a great question, and it leads to sort of that same overstimulation that we were talking about, and getting back into the world again and dealing with peers, even if it's from a distance. And it's funny. I was thinking about my own kid's schedule, and the idea that the afternoon snack or the after school snack is really there for a purpose, right? Your brain has been working all day, so your spleen has been processing all this information. And your heart's been working really overtime trying to deal with all the social interactions. So the ability to sit down and have a little snack, a little bit of sweet, because the spleen loves sweet, to kind of build all those things back up again and focus and ground is really kind of cool. And so that's step one, is to kind of build in the structure of, okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to have a little easy to digest, nourishing, not processed kind of snack. And we'll chat about our day and figure out what happened. And that kind of debrief is really important for the spleen too, to kind of process what we did and what we learned today. And then the other thing is breathing, right? It's the next step in the cycle. And taking 10 deep breaths is enough, it's been shown to enough to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, to lower all the adrenaline and craziness that's been going on, and release endorphins and make you feel happy and kind of ready to do what's next. And especially here in New York, we're all, breathing from up here. Our diaphragm never goes below, our nose, really. It's so tight and horrible. And our kids are doing that too. Our kids are forgetting how to breathe. And so 10 deep breaths can go a long way. So I think that's always a prescription for a lot of things from me. It's remember how to breathe.
Great. I feel like that's a good reminder. And I love the idea of a little snack time break and then debriefing and just having that transition time. I can see that being.
And a lot of times we think of, oh, they just have to run it out. Mm-hmm. And a lot of kids do. There is that element of kids that, especially if they're in more structured schools, that they've been sitting all day. That doesn't happen quite as much as it used to, right? We're 2020s, we move a lot at school. And so having a little bit of run around is great, but so often kids are just so overtired, and it actually makes things worse. And so you want to make sure that they're out in the fresh air and the sunshine and run around, but then they do have this grounding ritual at home. And so often we just don't build that into our own schedules ourselves. And so we don't teach it to our kids either. So.
Do you have advice on meditation or guided breathing breathwork for kids? Is there like a YouTube or somewhere that could be helpful for guiding? So I would imagine meditation for a child is a little different.
It is. It's nice that the New York public schools are actually incorporating it into their morning meetings often these days. So they are teaching them a little bit about it, and it's pretty cool. I would say most of the meditation apps that are out there now have guided meditation for kids. And it's important to let your kids listen to a few of them. And, sometimes like, I don't like that voice, or, whatever it is, that they have opinions, and, you want to hear them out and see what's most appealing to them. But some of them are really great and very simple. And some are more imaginative, that they're doing imaging, others are breath work. And so it's what your kid gravitates to is probably what they need.
And then someone in the chat actually just said that Cosmic Kids is a great resource for meditation. So thank you. I will add that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you.
Email. I love that. Love that name too.
Yeah.
So I think we're kind of coming to an end here. I wanted to see if anyone had any more questions before we sign off on our pediatric chat. Everyone, 1 or 2. you. But while we're waiting, potentially or not, Mary, thank you so much for sharing all of this
Well,
information.
thank you. It was fun.
It's been super interesting. And I feel like helpful for me too.
You kid at heart.
Exactly.
Well, then actually, it's a really important point is that we all, our inner child needs a little soothing these days. So it's okay to admit that. It's encouraged to admit it and to act on it.
Oh, someone says thank you all the way from Sweden. That's so great.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Thanks for joining.
That's awesome. Great. Well, have a great rest of your, well, evening in Sweden and day over here. This has been really fun, and I'll send an email to everyone. And if you have any other questions, you can just let me know and I will help find an answer for you.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.